Hey, everybody. This episode of Our Kids Play Hockey is brought to you by our title sponsor, NHL Sense Arena. Look, we all want our kids to succeed in hockey, but let's face it, finding training that's both effective and enjoyable can be a real challenge, and not to mention expensive and a total drain on time, especially if you have to drive to the rink, pay a private instructor. There's so many reasons that money gets spent on this game. But that's where NHL Sense Arena steps in. It's a virtual reality training game that brings the rink into your home that takes off-ice training to a new reality. It's designed to improve hockey sense and IQ, something that's lacking majorly in the game today for both players and goalies. And you get unlimited access to over 100 drills and training plans from top coaches and players that can be played anytime, anywhere, with drills approved by USA Hockey player and goalie development directors. Look, improving mental hockey skills at home has really never been more fun, and any hockey player that uses this is going to have a blast. All right. I've used this before on my own, and it feels like you're so immersed in an arena, you sometimes forget you have a headset on. And again, it's not being on the ice, but it allows you to work on some of these skill sets like scanning, as I said before, hockey IQ, looking around the rink, making the right plays, that getting those repetitions in now as a hockey player are super important for your development. So NHL Sense Arena is giving all the listeners an exclusive offer for $50 off an annual plan when you use our code Hockey Never Stops at checkout. Again, that's Hockey Never Stops. All you got to do is go to hockey.sensearena.com. Again, that's hockey.sensearena.com. Use the code Hockey Never Stops, and you'll save $50 on your annual plan of NHL Sense Arena. Make sure to check that out and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hey everybody, it's Lee. Got a great episode today with John O'Sullivan. Let me put it this way. I'm not going to do this guy's resume in the open here because it would take too long, but this is a guy you're going to want to listen to. He is somebody, that Mike Christie and I listen to regularly. He's a leader when it comes to youth sports, and you're going to just draw an amazing amount of information today out of this episode about coaching, approach to youth sports in general, and mentality as a parent, mentality as an athlete. You're going to want to listen to this one probably with your kids because John O'Sullivan is a big name in youth sports, not just here, but through his TED Talk, through his books, through his work with the Changing the Game project. And also, real quick before we jump in, if you want to support us, if you want to support this show, head over to ourkidsplayhockey.com and check out our curated gift section. We have off-ice training tools there for the off-season, the summertime, which we're heading into right now. We've got gifts for coaches, for families. If you're just a big hockey fan, we've got some great gifts there as well. And again, we've created these deals through guests that we've had on and people that we know support the show. So again, if you're looking to support us, check it out, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Just look for the gift guide. But if that's not your jam, no worries. Let's get in the episode right now with John O'Sullivan. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, and I'm joined by Hockey Podcast of the Year winners, Christy Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli. Our guest today, John O'Sullivan, has also had an award-winning resume. Let me take you through some of these highlights. He is the host of one of the top-rated podcasts in the world for coaches, aptly titled The Way of the Champions podcast. In addition, he is leading youth sports blogging, and he's an author of 2 #1 best-selling books, Changing the Game and Every Moment Matters. He has another book coming out. We're going to dive into that on the show today as well. He is known internationally as a TEDx speaker, and we highly recommend that you watch his talk titled Changing the Game in Youth Sports, which we know you will after listening to this episode. He is also the founder of the Changing the Game project, which was started in 2012. We'll also get into that today. He sits on the National Board for the Positive Coaching Alliance and the National Association for Physical Literacy. He is a former collegiate and professional soccer player and has coached for over 20 years from the youth through collegiate levels. He has consulted with the U.S. Olympic Committee, USA Soccer, USA Football, USA Lacrosse, USA Swimming, Ireland Rugby, Aussie Rules Football, and many more. And today, he is here to consult with us. John, that was an awesome resume. Welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be your first guest since the announcement of the Sports Podcast Awards. I was reading them. I'm on their email list, and I saw that the other day. I'm like, wait a sec, I think I'm on that show next week. So this is awesome to be here.
Well, thank you, sir, for the compliment. We are deeply honored by that. And I was actually telling Christy and Mike and Caitlin, our producer, you probably are the perfect guest for the next episode after because you stand for everything that we stand for on this show. And I know that our listening audience loves hearing from people like you, because in the hockey world, I think what happens is there's so much, I don't want to call it toxic culture, but negativity, that people come to this show to get away from that. So I think it's great that you're here today, because I think it's going to really invigorate a lot of people, especially as we step into the off season when we're recording this.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
No, thank you. So, John, I wanted to start with this question. Our most popular episode of all time is titled "3 Things You Should Say to Your Kids Before You Step on the Ice." And we went through a lot of great ones in that, but one of the biggest takeaways I had from your TED Talk was one of those things, and it was to always say to the kids, "I love watching you play." And first off, I want you to know I always say that to my son and daughter before they take the ice now. It's become a part of my routine, along with, I love you no matter what happens out there.
Yeah.
But can we just take a few minutes to dive into the psychology behind that and why you feel that is so important to say to your children before they play sports in general?
Yeah, sure. And I certainly don't take credit for making up the idea that you should tell your kids you love them no matter what. I heard it first from a guy named Bruce Brown, and I thought, wow, that's such a simple thing. My kids were super young at that time, and it just became a habit of mine as well. And it's just amazing how many people will write me and say, I just saw your TED Talk. I've been doing that for years, and I tell people all the time it makes such a difference. So, I mean, I think the psychology behind it is just it frees your children from the burden of being responsible for your happiness, right? And I don't think anyone spends all the time and money to put their children in any youth sport just because they want to be miserable, or that their love of their child is dependent on whether they win or lose or play well. But yet oftentimes our words and our actions before, during, after a game reflect something different to the kids. And so creating this sort of habit around what do I do pregame, what do I do postgame, that just makes it a consistent response to your child, so that they never get too high and they never get too low, right? And it's funny because different kids want different things, right? My daughter, loves to chat about the game right after in the car, and the only question that has ever once occurred to my son is, when can we eat? How soon? And what is it going to be? So yeah, I mean, it's just an important thing that if we just create that habit, it's just really powerful, and it lets your kids own the whole experience rather than it being your experience.
Right. And it's not too late to develop those habits, especially if parents have some bad ones, right?
Well,
how do they start?
Yeah, and Christy, I mean, we were talking before the show how your daughter just played her last collegiate hockey game, and I've had parents call me and say, yeah, my kid's a senior in college, and I just told him or her, I love watching you play, no matter, for the first time. And we both broke down in tears, because I had never said that before. Where were you 10 years ago or something? So yeah, it's never too late.
I think another important part of that, John, is that I think a lot of parents feel that, but don't say it. So I think it's important when we're talking about that, saying it is one thing, and it does mean something to the kids. I know it meant something to me when I was growing up, but there's also just simply not saying it. And that can have an effect as well. We shouldn't assume that the kids know that that's how we feel about them. And, in my journey as a parent, as all of us, I'm often surprised by the discoveries I make of, wow, I wonder if my parents felt this way. And of course they did, because they're going through the journey as well. So, for those of you listening, there's a power in not saying it too, and it's not a good power, right? So whatever your choice phrases are, TED is all about ideas worth spreading. That was a fantastic idea to spread. And I'm going to say it again to our audience. Please, when you're done with this episode, watch his TED Talk. It is not that long. I believe it's 20 minutes, John, if I'm not mistaken. It will impact you heavily.
14.
There
right?
you go.
It's 14 minutes because I know that because I spent 100 hours writing a 14-minute talk. So
yeah, that's why it was so good. John, I wanted to move on to this. This is a perfect one. We received an email from a listener recently that was actually saving for this episode, because I wanted to get your thoughts as part of this group. So in short, he asked us to speak about the pressure that parents put on their kids to perform. And he specifically referenced having watched his kids get older and the focus of parents having changed from, and this is his quote, development to performance. And this seems to be a common thread in youth sports. So my question for you, and it's for the whole panel, what do you believe are the contributing factors, and what should we do to change that conversation so we don't leave the development mindset and only worry about performance?
I mean, that's such a great question. And I think the problem with that is we've taken that shift off development far too young, right? When we start labeling, children who sleep with teddy bears as elite, right? Then we start thinking about performance and instead of development. And what's development? Development's all about making mistakes and learning from those mistakes and things like that. Here's a funny story. I years ago, I was doing a talk for like the Missouri Hockey Coaches Association, and I finished the talk, and their president, I think at the time, got up and he's like, "Wow, that talk just reminded me of this story of my son." And he said, we were at this quote, air quotes, super important, under 10 tournament or something like that. And he goes, the game was about to end. We had a face off in our end with about 10, 15 seconds left. The other team was ready. My son was supposed to take the face off, and he's just skating around in circles and skating around in circles. And the official was like, "Hey, come on." And my son didn't come over. So he just dropped the puck. The kid takes it, scores. We lose the tournament final. And all the parents are beside themselves, and I'm beside themselves. And so we get in the car after, and I said to my son, "What were you thinking about in that moment?" And he goes, "Turtles." Turtles. Right. And it's just like, you have to look at who's in front of you. And oftentimes we treat children like mini adults and just assume they're smaller versions of us, but they have the same needs and values and priorities. And certainly they do not. And so I think one of the most important things is it's really sport for development, until your 20s, to be honest, right? If you're a pro, you're still developing. I mean, when does a hockey player reach their peak? In their late 20s? So great, you're developing. Now you might be getting paid, and you might be, on TV and playing for a championship. And it doesn't mean that winning doesn't take on more significance as you grow older, but it's still sport for development. And especially when kids are playing cross ice hockey and especially before puberty, it's never about performance, because you have no idea what anyone's going to be until after they go through their growth spurt anyway. So trying to judge who's elite and who's not, and this is about performance and winning, when really it's often about when were you born in the calendar year and when did you grow. It's just kind of ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. You're right. And also we see, we talk a lot about this, about the early specialization of kids, and not enough free time and free play for the kids to learn how to be creative when they're in situations too.
Definitely. And it doesn't mean that a kid who loves hockey can't play a lot of hockey, but you also have to walk the path with them of when do they want time off? When do they need, I really do want to go to that birthday party. I really, don't want to go to 4 weeks of skating camp all summer long and stuff like that. I just need to be a kid.
Yeah,
Sorry, Mike, interrupted you. Yeah.
No. I'm just like, well, so I have like years and years of watching you and stealing so much stuff from your Changing the Game project. I mean, I think every like guide
borrowing, Mike. We're borrowing. He's
borrowing.
on the air with us.
But I think
steal away.
I think every parent's guide that I put out for the last 8 years, 9 years has had snippets of your research and your conversations in there. Only because you've eloquently put these in and articulated a lot of what we all feel as parents. And my fear, really, I'm sure, not getting frustrated, like for a guy like you, right? And I know for me, it's like I'm doing this all the time, and I I'm not around a lot of change. Like I see it going the wrong way, and well, in my mind, the wrong way, right? So,
Mhm.
and I've for the last maybe 10 years, I've tried to reframe. Again, I work mostly with youth hockey, youth lacrosse, and framing that development. Like, who cares about development? Like I don't know. It's hard for me to understand why we put our kids into programming for development, because
Mhm.
that's not what we put them in for. We put them in to have an activity and have fun.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
development is a byproduct of having fun and loving the game and finding ways to love. So, when I see coaches, especially in the hockey settings that I'm in, say, well, this is a developmental program. Well, number one is we're all development. I mean,
Mhm.
unless you're a program that's able to go, okay, I'm having a trial for 300 kids. I'm selecting 15 that somebody else developed, and I'm just going to take them. And then next year, hopefully, these other guys develop more kids, so I can take them and cut the kids I didn't develop. It's a
Yeah.
vicious cycle, that we see at the youth sports level. And now I'm seeing it creep in this is the first time in the last 3-4 years. Now I'm seeing it at our recreational lacrosse level. Like, nobody plays recreational hockey anymore. Nobody
Mm.
plays recreational lacrosse in my world. I'm in the East
Mhm.
Coast,
Mhm.
Northeast. Everything's about, how do we end the rec season quick enough so that we can get to the elite travel season? And
Yeah.
Right. And parents fall into that trap too, Mike, because
well,
everybody around you is doing it. So that means I have to do it too. No one's
right,
saying time out. Let's
right.
just
So
let our kids.
when I've
Right.
read, I mean, the nice thing about reading John's stuff and following his, the stuff that he puts out is that, and Lee, right? It's very similar to what we get in our own private messaging. Like, you feel like, okay, well, there's somebody else out there that I have some allegiance to that's sane, like that's
Mhm.
really trying to send this message out that it's not about development, it's about activity and fun
Yeah.
and
Right.
everything else. And guess what? If you put your kids in those situations, they will develop. They will
Right.
become elite
You know,
athletes later
yeah.
on because they're still playing. And
Mhm.
John, maybe you could speak real quick before
Yeah.
Lee
Right.
interrupts me.
Yeah. And the importance of you still need all those elements of developing good habits and work
Well, no
ethic and
doubt, no
all
doubt, Kristen,
that.
right? But does it really
Right.
matter if your 10-year-old is a horrible player, but they love the game? Like, it doesn't
No.
matter. I've worked with so many kids that, like, I run a little junior ranger program. These kids are, whoever listens to this, right? They're not elite athletes. They're not the best 10-year-olds in their age group, but I can tell you this, they love coming to the rink and they hate getting off the ice.
Right.
Mhm.
And I could run that same exact program, that same lesson plan, and I do, with the quote unquote elite athletes in that same age group, and they love it and they can't wait to get off the ice. Now, I can put those same elite athletes into line drills and beat them up and yell at them and scream at them and tell them how much they suck and they're not worthy of wearing the jersey. Like, what is our end game? Our end game is to, and John speaks about this a lot in his talks, is like, what's the statistic, John? 13 years old, 12, 13. All of a sudden, that's where kids say, Mom, Dad, I'm done. I can't
Mhm.
take this anymore.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
I think
hopefully they say that. Hopefully they say that.
you touch on so many different points there from a parenting perspective and a coaching perspective. Number one, it should be about joy, right? And even when we've had Steve Kerr on the podcast or, national champion collegiate coaches, they talk about joy. Joy is the number one thing that drives what they do to win championships at the highest level. Why wouldn't joy be what it's about with 9-year-olds or 10-year-olds? And it has to be. And that doesn't matter whether they're in, year one, welcome to hockey, or they're classified as a quote talented 8-year-old or 9-year-old or 10-year-old. It's still about joy, right? It's not hockey work. It's playing hockey. And so I think that's such a critical thing for us never to forget. It doesn't matter how good your kid is, how fast, how strong, how technical. If they don't love it, they're eventually going to walk away, right?
100%.
Or if they don't walk away because they're complying with you or you're forcing them to play, you'll ruin your relationship, and they're going to be in therapy later on for a long time because of a lot of identity issues caused by youth sport. And it's the only thing we spend like so much time and energy on, like, you know, our kids' public success in sport, right? Like how many, you know, which is so sad because there's so many other things to make a great, well-rounded human being, but yet the whole spotlight is on sports success. And then I think from a coaching standpoint as well, right? Like, you know, games-based drills, especially in a sport like hockey, that is, right, it's an invasion game. It's moving fast. It's, you know, in split seconds, kids have to perceive what's happening around them, come up with a solution to the problem, choose the right solution, technically execute it, assess their choice, and do it again, right? That's an invasion
and
sport.
fail eloquently.
And fail eloquently and
Right.
fail most of the time, right? And so you put kids in line drills with no defenders and running super fancy patterns, right? And then all of a sudden, and so parents, they come to practice and look at all those cones and look at the organization and whatever, and then they don't understand why it's chaos on Saturday. But like, if your practice isn't chaotic, you'll never learn how to play on Saturday.
Right.
And so we have all these different issues of the way we coach is oftentimes the worst way to prepare them for a chaotic game environment, and the way we treat kids is the worst way to keep them in sport for a long enough time to actually be good. Right. The only kid who doesn't get better is the kid who quits.
That's the worst nightmare of every coach too. We always say, don't be a kid's last coach on this show a lot. And you know, John, another reoccurring theme on this show, you know, we're talking about performance development. It's what is the focus of those words? And we say all the time, is it on the athlete or the person? Right? I wrote down here, you know, focus on the development of the person, the performance of the person. And the other stuff typically takes care of itself. We did an episode. I actually have to thank Mike and Christy for this. I haven't had a chance to do this yet. But we did this episode of, you know, should my kids play spring league? And I have the youngest kids on the show, so I'm experiencing a lot of these pressures for the first time, and I'm so thankful for these two, John, people like you. You know, I seek out these communities because even I was a bit conflicted of should my kid play spring league, and the consensus was take a break. We did. I'm so happy that we did because you can feel it within a week of like, wow, I'm just totally more relaxed than I was.
Does it feel good?
Oh, it really does. It really does. And it's been nice to just spend time. I went to a movie with the kids the other day. That's like
Oh my gosh. You actually went to a movie.
We went to a movie as a family.
That doesn't happen during the hockey season.
No, we didn't talk about hockey at all during it. But we talk about, you know, those types of concepts and the fact that we're always learning. You know, Mike, Christy, John, I got this from a friend the other day. They were asking me about what should I do to improve my kids' skating this summer. All right. And the kid's 9-10 years old. And I want to preface this with this. I'm not against good skating instruction if a kid is ready for it in one sit. There's a lot of value in high level skating instruction. But I told these parents, take your kid to a public session and leave them alone. And let them dodge the other people on the ice. Let the skate guards yell at them for playing tag. But I said a kid will learn his edges or her edges faster at a public session on their own, playing, right, John, having some joy, than they will with me or anyone else just teaching them.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Excellent advice.
Thank you.
Well,
Mike,
John, and you know that's what's so fun. Like, right, John, is that the ironic thing is if you want your 9-year-old to be a better skater, then don't let somebody drill the skating ability out of them in practice for 28 weeks. Like, we use this example all the time to any of the parents I talk with. Like, if you go to the greatest power skating coach in the world, and you work with them for a week, and then you have me take your kid for 28 weeks, and I just drill the kids, and I don't care what their form looks like. I don't care if they're using their edges correctly. I don't care if they're extending properly. All the things they learned in that one little week, I'm drilling out of them for 28 weeks. I will win that development race in a bad way, right? My kids are going to be really good at being bad at that skill. And I think that's where, like, what Lee's doing, like I talk to 8 and 9-year-old parents all the time. Is that the best way to be a better skater? Don't skate. Go run. Go do a pivot. Go play tennis. Go do something. Go get on a slide board. Do something different with your muscles and your body and your mind and create a different environment. And I think what we all try to do, and maybe John, you could speak to a little bit only from especially experience across all the sports you work with. Like, if a kid is going to be great, couldn't we do more damage than not by not just allowing that player to play? Like, if a player is going to be great, they're going to be great. If you just sometimes just leave them alone, just let them have joy.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, very few people know what really good looks like, right? They have no idea, right? Oh, I watch pro hockey on TV or whatever, and that does nothing, right? You need to get on the ice and watch at ice level, really up close, to see how fast and everything that's moving. So most of the people who think that their kid's special have no idea what special looks like, right? Now, the ones who do are, usually people who played at a high level, and so they get it, right? A lot of it, I think, is the luck of having a really good coach when a kid's young, and it sort of ignites that passion, and they feel competent early on, which is super helpful. And then, yeah, I mean, when you're young kids, right? Like, we sometimes treat kids like they're robots, and all we need to do is program all this technical or skating ability into them, and they'll be fine. But they're not. They're human beings, and they have emotions, and they have desires and motivations. And so if a kid is like super excited, like, yeah, I want to go to skating camp, okay, we can try a week. But if it's you're the one who's excited, and it's you're going, oh my God, but if we don't, and Jenny's kids do, and Bill's kids do, then my kid's going to fall behind. Well, now your young child will comply, but now the next hockey season rolls around, they're not excited for hockey season because it never ended. The last one never ended, right? And so versus like, hey, you take a break. I mean, here's the thing. I would bet that everyone in the NHL was probably the best athlete in their high school, right? Anyone in Major League Baseball was probably the best athlete in their high school, or pretty darn close to it, right? So helping your kid become a great athlete is super important when they're young, right? And yes, hockey has the specific skill of skating and do it that doesn't necessarily come as naturally, but you're easing that in. But again, you can also make him a great skater and totally burn him out by 12, 13. And then what was the point?
John, to that point in hockey, I was very fortunate in my hockey journey to play as long as I did. I loved skating, and no one ever took that away from me, right? And I think back now about the reasons I kept going and the reasons I love to play. And I love hockey, I do. But man, I love skating. It was never a chore to me, right? And I'm realizing, I think in today's world, that might have been taken, right? In the sense of because I was a skilled skater at a young age, I think I would have been plucked and do this clinic, do that clinic, do this clinic, do that clinic. I just skated and I loved it, right? You can get caught up in the tornado of, as we talked about earlier, elites, supreme, whatever, and as a parent, you go, well, he's got to go there. Man, it's very hard to make pro hockey, college hockey, high level hockey if you don't love hockey. And I'll tell you what, the people I see that do make it, that don't like it, which does happen, it is a tough conversation, and they are typically extremely depressed, right? Again, I don't want to go too deep into that, but if they don't love the game, there really is very little chance of them going beyond a certain age. I do want to shift here because I want to talk about the Changing the Game project.
Yeah, let me just I just want to just add one piece because I think it's important, and that word love. I don't want the listeners to miss that the greatest gift you can give your kids is to help them fall in love with the sport. The greatest thing a coach can do is help kids fall in love with the sport. We're all talking about, I coach soccer, you all coach hockey, or whatever. I mean, you can play until you're 60 or 70, right? Like, if we stop looking at sport journey as something that ends when they're 18, or in the case of your daughter, Christy, 21 or 22, and looked at it as like, hey, this is a 50-year journey. we're talking about a 3 to 5 year slice here. Would we treat it and act differently in those 3 to 5 years if this was 3 to 5 years of 50 versus like when we go to the gym, right? You know, we don't treat our kids like, you know what, you're not going to lift a single weight after the age of 18, so you better get it all in now. Like we don't do that. And when I don't know if you guys know this, I coach soccer at University of Vermont, and my office door was right next to Gutterson Ice Rink. And I used to go eat lunch in sort of like May and June when the NHL season ended. All the former UVM guys used to come back and play pickup every morning. And I used to go and bring my lunch and go sit down on the bench and watch, because I got to know some of them. And I'm watching pickup hockey, and it's John LeClaire, Aaron Miller, Marty St. Louis, Tim Thomas, NHL All-Stars, world champions, whatever. And they just like to play hockey.
Yeah.
They just like to play, and they're just sitting there playing pickup with the college guys. And it was amazing to watch. It was so awesome to watch.
Also, and conversely, be open to your kids teaching you how to fall in love with a sport too, because honestly, I was a figure skater, knew nothing about hockey, didn't really care for hockey. My husband, baseball player, other sports, soccer. My kids, for some unknown reason, were driven to play hockey, and we introduced them to every other sport on the planet, but somehow they gravitated toward the ice. And then I fell in love with it through them. So you also have to have your heart open to what they are passionate about and want to pursue.
Yeah. Sorry, Lee. Sorry to interrupt.
No. Please, you are always ready to interrupt. It's fine with me. Chrissy, I was going to say, I would love to go back in time 20 years and say, hey, you're going to be a host on one of these award-winning podcasts one day.
You're crazy. You're nuts.
John,
no, thank you.
I'm glad you brought it up, John, because actually you made me think of something I haven't thought of. You teach your kids the passion and love of something, which then can be applied to lots of other things, including a family, not just professional work. I don't know why you triggered this thought in my head, but I think, and I've gotten this compliment more than once, but it might be the greatest compliment I've ever received in terms of my hockey journey was they would say, I see how much you love that game and how passionate you are about that game, and I know you can do it in this relationship or this job. I've been told that. Right. So it had nothing to do with my skill or my journey. It had everything to do with the love and the passion. People saw that. And I think anyone who's passionate or in love with something, you can see it, and it teaches you an aspect of that word love and the definition of the word love, which is so important because not everybody has a wonderful definition of that word. People perceive love in different ways, some through pain. Right. So,
but love is the single most important ingredient in great coaching. Love is the single most important ingredient in great teams, and love is the single most important ingredient in getting better at something. If you don't love it, you're not going to invest enough in something to be very good, whether it's your relationship, your job, or your development in school, sport, music, whatever. But when someone has that passion, and especially when a teacher has that passion, it is crystal clear to that teacher's students, that coach's athletes. It's crystal clear.
Well, and I think it often goes unsaid or not talked about. I think there's a stigma surrounding exactly what we're talking about, and that's actually a perfect segue into a couple things here. So we're going to talk about John's organization, the Changing the Game Project. But before we do, John, I wanted to read this little story here, because a lot of times I think in the work that we're all trying to do, it can sometimes seem to the audience like it's an uphill battle, that the negativity, the toxicity is so vampant that we can't get past it. But here we go. We talk about breaking the status quo. I want to give a shout out to the Battery Hockey Academy, who announced this week that they will be removing the words elite and selects from all of their teams. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a little shocked to read this, because this is something I think we've all been pushing for. It's a first step. It's not a large step. And they wrote a very lengthy explanation of why, and that the development of these kids as people is more important than being on a selects or an elite team. And that brings me, John, to what you do. And I want everybody listening to really take note of this, because this is an amazing resource that we all use, and it could be one for you too. You know, the Changing the Game project, which has been a game changer, pun intended, is all about youth sports. And on that site, you provide education, resources, speakers, thoughts, books, so much more on how we can, as you put it, return youth sports to our children. And I know that the audience agrees with the mission completely, but I'm also sure, as we said, they might see it as a major uphill battle. So what are some of the steps we can take through the project and as a community as a whole to make changes like this within our own organizations? Because I know there are people listening that want to take these steps, but they have no idea where to start.
Ooh, it's a great question, and it is a great story, and congratulations to that group for having the courage to do that, because usually what happens is someone pops up next door and says, "Oh yeah, well, we're the elite ones then."
I didn't read the comments after. I just read the note. I didn't want to read any of the comments.
You know, and
the comments are the best part. Go in there and read the comments.
Yeah. So that's the thing. You know, I mean, I think if your question is about as an organization, well, I think the first organization we're part of is a family. And so as a family, as parents of our children in sport, I think the first thing we have to do is come up with a clear sort of mission statement about what is the purpose of sport in our children's lives. And I don't think most parents would come up with a thing of like, to raise an elite hockey player or raise an elite. Now, I realize socioeconomically, sometimes they're like, this is the only way out of a really bad situation through sport, and we might put more emphasis in it. But, you know, if we are, you know, a family where we've been college educated and our kids are probably on that path and whatever, you know, sport is something that would usually be used to develop character and develop a better human being, and we're just using sport as the vehicle. So if that's the goal, that at 22 years old or 18 or 22 or beyond, I want a fully functioning human being who's physically healthy, mentally, emotionally healthy, who has a love for activity and movement, which has so many benefits in their life, and has been surrounded by great positive mentors who have taught him or her, you know, all this important stuff about dealing with adversity and struggle and failure and sportsmanship. If that's why we put our kids in sport, if that's the goal, then work backwards from there. What do we need to do at 8? What do we need to do at 10? What do we need to do at 12? Who cares if this coach wins more games than anyone else if he or she is emotionally abusive of children and most people quit who play for them? Then who cares, right? Who cares if they won all their games? Well, yeah, how many of their players are still playing for that club at 18 that were there at 10? Or like Mike said before, did they just go out and recruit more kids whose coaches develop them because they don't develop them, right? And so I think family wise, we start with, where do we want to be in 10 years and work backwards from there? As an organization, I think we have to do the same thing. And as an organization, we have to recognize, well, what is our mission? And if our mission is, you know, that, hey, we just want to build the love of the game, and that there's, you know, maybe a junior NHL team or a AAA team nearby, our mission really shouldn't be to keep all the kids and don't let anyone go there. Like, hey, let's build a partnership with them and let's develop. And when kids move on, we celebrate those kids, right? And then we move the next group up in to take their place, because, you know, we take pride in developing kids and moving them on. Like where I see so many organizations fail is they try to be everything to everybody, and they lose sight of their mission statement. And they don't have the facilities and the money and the coaching and the things to truly be, you know, a AAA hockey organization or, you know, an academy program in soccer or whatever. But they try to do that, and they try to hoard their kids, and they don't encourage kids to outgrow their programs. And so, you know, just getting crystal clear on what your values are and realize that it's not going to be for everyone, and it's okay. Like, it's okay. If you want to fly first class and on your airlines, don't buy a Southwest ticket because they don't have first class, and they're okay with that, right? Like, that's what made them successful, at least up until the last couple of years, was they're crystal clear on who they are, and what they wanted to do. And if that wasn't for you, okay, fair enough. You've got lots of other choices out there.
Right. I think that's the real, for a guy like me and what I do, right? That's where the frustration comes with me, is because sometimes you look at some of these teams that I work with, and they're sprinkled in with the parents are Division I college hockey coaches, ex-pro athletes, people that have played at the highest level of a game, and then they become a parent. Like they fall into it. They fall into like, oh my God, my kid's not getting enough ice time. He's not on the power play. How come they keep short shifting him? I think that coach doesn't appreciate them. I go, he's 6. I go, what do you mean? Like he's like where, like, I think that, and I think everybody wants to be, the Williams sisters. Like everybody thinks their kid is that kid.
Right.
Like, so it's hard when you say, hey, listen, statistically, and I agree with you. Most parents, if you sat them down and you said, what are your goals for your kids? I want them to be healthy. I want them to love going to a sport. I want them to be lifelong learners and lifelong physical fitness enthusiasts or whatever. And then when the rubber hits the road, though, it's like, well, for those kids, like my kid's actually really good. Like my kid's being called by 2 coaches right now. They're being recruited by this other select team. I got a call. I'm in New York, but this coach in Oregon wants me to come, play for him for some elite showcase tournament. And so
you don't want to come play hockey in Oregon. I'll tell you that.
It's getting better. It's getting better. So I think it's one of those. This is the dilemma, is that the governing bodies, I think the governing bodies need to, this is my opinion, eliminate the elite stuff, because your mission, because you just said it, John. What is your mission? And I guarantee in those mission statements, there's something in there about youth and allowing and being a vehicle for youth to experience the sport in a positive, uplifting way. So if that's your mission, be your mission. Don't worry about all the other, the numbers are going to be there. If you're a youth organization, I use the term developers and compilers. Like you have a program that just develops, a community-based program, develops kids, keeps them, they're loving it, they like it. And then you have the compilers, which are the teams that, say, we're staking our flag down. We're going to be a AAA organization. You're going to try out for us. It's cutthroat. You may play, you may not play, but if you're on our team, this is who you're going to be. You've chosen that. Yeah. Like you said, I chose to go Southwest, or I chose to go Lufthansa. Like I chose that. So don't come to me in December and say, oh my God, this is the worst experience for my kid. No. You chose that, you knowing full well what that organization was. But I think too many of us fall into the category that our kids are better than the other kids that we play with, rather than say, oh no, that kid actually, look at that kid's a really good 8-year-old. And
right. And sometimes
they need to leave,
Yeah. And they get drawn into these organizations that also have this big selling point. Hey, if your kid is on this team, they're going to be that elite player. We're going to give them the path to play college hockey. You see it all the time. And parents buy into it. And it's when you're sucked into it, it's hard to see clearly, honestly.
Right. And we affect that, right, John? How many, when you were at University of Vermont, how many 10U soccer games did you go to recruit players from?
0. Yeah.
It's like, and I was like, and we joke around a couple of times here, like there hasn't been a Squirt major championship, alumni game at the Marriott this year. Just you don't come back in 20 years and say, remember that championship we won out in Hauppauge and we beat the Nassau County Lions, beat the Long Island Gulls? It doesn't happen. So
there's someone said to me once, and I think it was Nicole Lavoie, who runs the Tucker Center for Women's Sports. She said to me, parents are vampires. And I said, what does that mean? And because I don't watch like Twilight, I don't watch vampire movies. So I don't know if either of you do. Do you know what happens? What is it about vampires when they look in the mirror? They can't see their own reflection. No. Right. And so that was her point, is that we don't see our behavior in ourselves. We see it in everyone else. Right. And so when I started changing the game project, right, it was a struggle for years to kind of get it up and running. But whenever I was on an airplane, And someone asked me what I did, and I told them. No one ever said, "Oh, that's dumb." They're like, "Oh my God, you have to come to my town." Right. Because then their next thing was, because all the other parents are nuts. I'm good. Like, no one's ever gone because I'm nuts. Like this, so I think this is our thing is, and sadly what it usually takes, people don't see, you talk to orthopedic surgeons, parents don't see it until the kid's third ACL or fourth concussion, right? Their third concussion, they're like, when can we get him back out there? We've got a sectional playoff game this weekend. It's like, your kid's got a traumatic brain injury, right? They can't leave a darkened room, and you're worried about getting them back in the field. Like, we're trying to make sure that they're a healthy, functioning adult. And so whether it's burnout, whether it's injury, whether it's all these things, we usually don't see it until it's too late. And again, I 99%, 99.9% of parents are great. There's a small percentage that are probably mentally ill and have, we can't do a ton there, but most are great, and the intentions are great, and they're doing things out of love, but they get so caught up in the whole thing. Like, when I coach, if I always ask, like, a young team, like, how many of you is this your oldest child going through this for the first time? And if a lot of hands go up, this is going to be rough, right? Because, like, and it's my job to educate and teach and just get you to relax and enjoy this journey, because it goes by very fast. But if everyone's like, nah, this is my fourth kid, I'm like, oh, this is sweet, because like, they're just like, whatever, just go, because they know how it ends.
John, I want to say too, just to prove your point, right? And this is why communities like this podcast, like the Changing the Game project, are so important. And I use myself as an example, because, Christy, Mike, all these episodes, they encourage me to look in the mirror. Right? I'm not impervious to. I've played the game. I host a show about the game, but even like they said, that taking a break in the spring, I struggled with that.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, you did.
Right. So it's
you were this close to
I really was. I was
good.
thinking about it. And some of the thoughts that you're forced to, who is this for? Is it for them or is it for me? So I think part of the if solutions might not be the word, but part of the path forward is finding like-minded communities where they can encourage you, not force you, but encourage you to say, hey, you're a vampire sucking the life out of your kid, and you can't see your own reflection. Maybe not that harsh, but I think that's a huge part of this, the way forward.
Yeah. And I think also, just understanding that it goes by quickly, right? Your kids are young, and you're trying to keep up, and then all of a sudden, they're gone, and it's over, and you look back on it. And I remember with my own kids feeling just like you, Lee, like knowing, hey, if you want to be really good, they played soccer, like, you got to do more. But I'm not going to drag you to the kickback wall every day. I'm not going to force you to do, like, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. And then my job is just to help you understand when you're like, well, why does he play so much more than me? Well, you remember when, you went and did this rafting trip in the summer? He stayed and practiced, which is great, because that's what he wants to do, but you wanted to go rafting, which is awesome. But you can't, you can't do that and then expect this, right? And so, I just think, as coaches and as parents, we have to be truth tellers as well, that we help our kids on their journey and recognize that, I mean, oftentimes, most of the best athletes are actually late bloomers, right? They're not the early burners, right? The ones who shine earliest. Those kids usually fizzle out. It's the late bloomers who struggle to keep up because they haven't grown, or they're born later in the year and they struggle and they go, but they love the game. And as the parent, you just keep encouraging them, like, look, I can't like give you the magic pill to make you grow, but you can work on your technique. You can be fit. You can have teachable spirit. You can be a great teammate. You can do all these things. And then when you grow and all of a sudden everyone's big, strong, and fast, what's in your toolkit, And I think that's one of the things. And those are the kids, I know there's been studies on NHL draft picks, and most of them are the highest, paid higher draft picks come from later in the birth year, even though in junior hockey and in youth hockey, kids born January, February, March are way overrepresented on the top teams. So, it's funny. It's really who can play the long game best is the best way to help your kid really achieve in any sport.
Yeah, John, it's a fantastic answer too. And the other thing too is I wanted to focus on the coaches for a minute too. I know we have about like 6 minutes left, so I want to respect your time. But I wanted to get to this question before the end. Back in 2020, everyone's favorite year, you wrote a great blog called Great Coaches Are Both Firm and Flexible. Now, I know everybody listening's read something like that, but what stood out to me in the article is the exact things you said. You need to be firm when it comes to choices, strengths, and values, but also be patient when it comes to maturity, experience, and skill level. We've talked about this throughout the show here, but you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of coaches, and I know a lot of coaches listen to this show. So in a couple minutes, I know we probably need more time, but what are some of the ways coaches can pursue that type of mentality? And what else do you look for in great coaches?
I mean, yeah, that's a big question right there.
Right.
I just got back from Spain. I took my son's U16 team that I coach over there, and they got to work for a week with some really high level coaches who coached, and worked for FC Barcelona for many years. And I asked them, and I just sat on the sideline and I watched and I took notes and looked at someone else coaching my team and where it could be. And they weren't doing any activities that weren't similar to ones that I do or whatever, because I'm very into that same sort of methodology. But I asked like the kids, like, what was a big difference? And they talked about, coach, you ask us to do things and they demand us to do things. So when they're making simple errors on, in soccer, it's receiving the ball on your, farthest leg from the passer, opening your hips, scanning before you get it, things like that. Right. When, you do it, but they stop, do it again, stop, do it again. Right. Like demand the right sort of actions and behaviors. And they were very, very firm. But when they were coaching like technical or tactical things. There's never an attack on the human being. Never a you're lazy or you're this or you're that, right? So they were very demanding without being demeaning, right? There was nothing demeaning. Now, some kids don't like that, right? Because they're in a comfort zone of getting away with bad habits. But what was awesome was that these coaches said, no, I'm not going to let you get away with a bad habit. I'm not going to let you get away with this. I'm going to make you better. And I saw kids in 5 days get significantly better because of that demand to do the right thing, which was a simple thing that the kids were capable of doing, but maybe they exist in an environment where they can get away with not doing it. So, and then I think the other thing is, right, if I asked a room full of coaches, and I do this all the time, what are the qualities of your best coach? Right. And they talk about caring, they talk about great communication, they talk about passion, they talk about making it fun, organization, things like that. Right. And then you say, hey, open your coaching manual. Where's all that in this book? It's not in there. Right. And so this is the problem in coach education, because it's hard to assess. Right. It's easy to assess, hey, can you run an organized practice and run this activity and then do this and then do this? That's easy to assess. So we can give people a certification by assessing that. How do we assess, is he making it fun? How do we assess, is she, does she care about her players in an artificial environment like a coaching course? So we skip that, and yet go anywhere in any sport and ask, what are the qualities of your best coach, the one that you invited to your wedding years later, and has nothing to do with, they taught me a great, pattern on the power play. Right. I was just trying to think what the hockey equivalent is. The 4-3-3, and I got lost there. My limited hockey knowledge popped in. But it's like, it's not because of, yes, knowledge of the sport matters, but it's just not sufficient.
Right. It's super fair. And I think players crave, to your point, discipline, but it's got to be done the right way and not attacking them personally. It's just, as you said, this is the right way to do that. Or not attacking you. I would like precision with this.
Yeah.
John, we only have about a minute left. I just wanted to give a quick shout. I had a whole question about this, but I want to shout out the Way of the Champions conference, which everyone here can learn more about at the Changing the Game project. Just to give you an idea, there's some pretty heavy names at this. I noticed Phil Jackson, Steve Kerr. For our audience that doesn't watch anything outside of hockey, that's two of the greatest basketball coaches, actually two of the greatest coaches in minds in history. We're not going to go through a rundown, but make sure you check that out. And John, I also wanted to touch on your new book coming out, The Champion Teammate, which is coming out in May. Can you tell us a little bit about that? But I'm sure everyone's going to run to your other books right after this episode, but tell us about the new one. I know we're excited about that.
Yeah, cool. Well, and thanks for the conference shout out too. This will be the 7th year, and we obviously went nothing in 2020 and went virtual for 2 years and learned a lot doing it that way. And we're like, oh, can we blend the in-person and the virtual? And so we got Phil Jackson to do some stuff and Steve to do some stuff for us. And then, I mean, because Mike's a lacrosse guy, we have Cindy Timchel, who's the all-time winningest women's lacrosse coach, an absolute legend in the game, is going to be there live with us, you know, presenting and hanging out all weekend as well. So it's a super cool weekend. So yeah. So the new book, right? So my first book, Changing the Game, was, you know, kind of for parents, and it was also for coaches, but about the mentality. And then I wrote Every Moment Matters, which is really a coach focused book. What do the best coaches in the world do? But, you know, I do a lot of team development work with college teams, and I've obviously coached for, it's getting closer to 30 years now. And, you know, we always tell people, like, be a great teammate, but we don't teach them that. And so Jerry Lynch and I decided to write this book together on, you know, he's been doing college team development for 40 years, and he's got 39 NCAA titles, you know, to his name across a whole slew of sports. So what does it mean to be a great teammate? And so we wanted to write a book that college teams and high school teams and, you know, I think middle school on up, like so many teams do a book read, and, you know, it's like little 2-page chapters of a story of an athlete representing a quality of a great teammate, and then discussion questions afterwards. So you can think for yourself. And then as a team, as a coach, right, let's read a chapter and let's have a discussion around this. And so we broke the book up into like 3 sections, right? Connection, competing, because we want to compete, and then leadership, right? What does great leadership look like? And so it's probably, I think it's like 30 short chapters, 2 to 3 pages once a week. You could take, you know, 10-15 minutes of practice, read a chapter, talk about the story in the chapter. How does that relate to our team? What do we need to start doing that we're not doing now to do this better? What do we need to stop doing? And I think it'll just be a great way that we can get human development through our sport, and make people better teammates. Because you know what, like what we wrote in the book jacket is, our whole life, we're going to be part of teams, our family, work, community, church, and sports. And sports are a great way to learn how to be a great teammate. And if you're a great teammate, you will always be in demand.
I just think that that's fantastic for a multitude of reasons. And you know, one of them, John, is I'm always telling athletes, Mike and Christy are too, that one of the ways I value you is how you treat your teammates. And a great athlete, great, not good, will raise the ability of his or her teammates as an athlete and as a person. So I applaud you for that, because that is a guide we all need. And I will be picking that up when it comes out in May. We want you all to as well. It's not a sales push. It's an actual thing.
It's nice to say that, because just the other day, my co-anchor here in Syracuse, New York, we were just so impressed by what our colleagues were able to produce on the air, our newscast, that he and I wrote a thank you, and the first words were, "Hey team." Way to go team. You know, that's how we address, because we felt like as a team, we were able to do some remarkable work that we know our viewers appreciated. So that is so true. You know, that team spirit will carry on in your life in many different avenues of your life.
And why not learn it when you're 10?
Right.
11, 12. Why not learn it then? Why not learn
Exactly.
John,
well done. I'm so glad you brought that up.
You have been a fantastic teammate today. We'll stop holding you hostage. I know you have to go get your kid.
Thankfully, I will say, right, like we talk about passion, right? I have to leave because my son is at the gym and I have to go pick him up and take him to school. And I am not the one who asks them to get up at 6:20 in the morning to go to the gym. He's the one who says, Dad, can we go? So actually, he usually drags me to the gym 3 days a week.
I know the feeling.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that in my own life as well.
Yeah.
Everybody listening, make sure you check out the Changing the Game project. Please watch John's TED Talk. I'm begging you to go watch it. 15 minutes of your time, less than 15 minutes of your time. 14 minutes, and check out his Amazon page and his new book's coming out. John O'Sullivan, fantastic human being. You truly are changing the game, and we appreciate you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you all so much. This was super fun.
Thank you, buddy. So that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Remember, all of the award-winning edition episodes can be found at ourkidsplayhockey.com, including this one. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week. Have a great one. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.